Oh. Whoa, okay. Hello, everyone. We're going to start soon, but you won't be allowed to ask questions here. So if you have any questions for us, please DM me on Twitter. This is my account. I'm going to start. We still have 7 minutes. E se volete in italiano anche, va bene? Tradurremo le domande. Well, I think we can start. I see they closed the door, so nobody else is coming. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Tu mi hai detto 5 minuti prima. For coming. Sì. Okay, it's Friday night. You're here, and we are very happy that you are here. We weren't sure. Yeah, we come from different parts of the world, and some of us are jet-lagged. After this, there may be more opportunities to talk. This will go on for about an hour, but if you want to ask questions, hang out, have a drink, please feel free to approach us. Come to us. If you have ideas for investigations, it's even better. Yeah. Well, we can start by asking some questions first. Okay. Who of you know who the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists is? Yay. Okay, great. Who of you has read any stories from the Pandora Papers investigation? Okay. Nice. Thank you. All right, let's start. Thanks everyone who's here and also at home or wherever you are. My name is Scilla Alecci. I'm a reporter with the ICIJ. I also coordinate our partners in Asia and Western Europe. And here with me, there's Delphine Reuter. She's a data journalist and researcher with ICIJ. And then we have Jelena Cosic, who's our researcher, coordinator for partners in Eastern Europe, and also, most importantly, training manager for our partners. So today, we're going to talk to you about the Pandora Papers, but not just that. We would like to take this as an opportunity to also explain how ICIJ works and how we develop our investigations, and how, if you are a journalist and would like to work with us and have ideas for investigations, can always come to us, and we could start from there. These are our contacts. Please use them. I am based in Washington, where ICIJ is headquartered. Delphine is currently in Spain, and Jelena is currently in Belgrade, Serbia. But we are all over the world. So ICIJ started about 25 years ago, but 5 years ago we became independent. We were first part of another news organization, and after we released Panama Papers, we became independent. And so this year, actually, we turned 5. These pictures, maybe you've seen this before, but this really captures what ICIJ is about, because our strength is in the network and in the partners that we work with every day. We are a very small team of reporters and editors. We are about 30 in total in the organization, but we have partners and journalists, collaborators all over the world. And some of these journalists are freelancers, some work in very difficult situations or are from very small newsrooms, and some others are, big media outlets. The idea, though, is that together we are able to tackle some of the most difficult issues in the world. Our idea was that if criminals can get together and coordinate to expand cross borders, journalists should do the same, and even better, and coordinate, because some of the stories are bigger than one of us. They're bigger than journalists' egos, which are usually very big. And so every day when we work with our colleagues around the world, that's our focus, thinking that the story is bigger, and that the public, we work for the public interest, and that the public, it's an international public, a global public. So this is a little introduction to our team, to how we work. We have an editorial team, so I'm a reporter. And we have data journalists like Delphine and Jelena. We have a tech team that develops platforms that are specific to our project. And in addition to being, more traditional journalists, everything we do is also to help our partners everywhere in the world, because collaborations for us is the core of our mission, and it means also empowering journalists in places where media laws are particularly weak, or they have issues getting access to sources, or they don't have resources to work on investigations every day. So by doing this together, we want to really kind of also improve the journalism everywhere in these countries. And we learn from them. In the past 10 years, ICIJ has been investigating one of the most secretive industries in the world, which is the offshore financial industry, which as you know, it helps people avoid or evade taxes, but basically what they sell is secrecy. So we've been able to do this thanks to leaks that were provided either to ICIJ directly or to some of our partners, most notably the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany. And for 10 years, basically started in 2012 with offshore leaks, with a little data set from a Singaporean offshore provider, we have begun to uncover more and more about this industry that is so relevant today, because everyone today talks about Russian money, but we know that this is not something new. Governments have finally woken up to the idea that a lot of wealth is hidden somewhere in the BVI. Well, we were able to say that already 10 years ago. So we are going to soon to have more stories for you about this and the Russian money hidden offshore. So stay tuned in the next coming days. So within this, why is Pandora Papers so special? Well, it was the largest investigation, the largest collaboration, journalistic collaboration ever. And just to give you an idea, this is the comparison between the data that we've received since 2012 with offshore leaks until Pandora Papers. Pandora Papers is bigger in terms of the amount of data that we received. Why is it important to continue to investigate this industry? It is important because we are able to make a difference. Investigative journalism is a lot about impact or bringing about change. And at least as of last year, we were able to measure the amount of money that governments around the world had recovered. And that was about $1,300,000,000. And this is a very conservative estimate because this was calculated based on information that all of our partners have requested to their tax agencies around the world. And obviously, many tax agencies do not want to give out this information, so probably much more money has been recovered from investigations and fines and penalties after Panama Papers was released in 2016. But we know that this is only the tip of the iceberg. So that's why we are still here, years after the first leak, years after Panama Papers, still talking about papers, and I hope we will keep doing this, because we have witnessed an evolution in the industry, and we see how criminals and politicians still use the offshore industry, still hide money, even though, you know, a lot of countries need the resources, and we have seen it with COVID. We see it now. You know, every day there is a new crisis, and every day we know that there are trillions of dollars hidden offshores, or euros hidden offshores. Sorry. So talking about Pandora Papers, again, it was a leak account that came to ICIJ. Of about 12 million records, and Delphine and we will talk to you about how we organized all this data that was kind of a mess. And because it was so international, we worked with journalists from around the world, in this case, more than 600 reporters. Because the leak was so, you know, it had information on many different countries. More than 100 countries were represented, and so we needed reporters from those countries. And Jelena will talk to you about how we organized the collaboration, which is not easy. The other reason why Pandora Papers was so special, it was because it was the first time that the leak was not coming just from one source, from one offshore provider, but it was coming from 14 different offshore providers. And which means that we were really able to connect the dots between the different elements of the industry, and to be able to say, this is not an isolated case. This is not a firm in Panama that is bad. You know, this is the whole system that works this way. So maybe it's time to do something about it. And also, it gave us the opportunity to see how many different actors in this sector work. You know, from lawyers to bankers to accountants, because this is not just a problem of a corrupt person hiding money. There is a whole ecosystem to help them do that. So when you have a leak like that, I think of it as a jigsaw puzzle. Imagine you have a jigsaw puzzle with 12 million pieces. What do you do? What do you do with puzzles? You usually start with corners, right? I mean, corners, and then you start identifying the frame, and then little by little you build the puzzle. So what do you do when you have something like this? This is just one chart that we had in the data. This is a trust that was used by the Legionaries of Christ, that you may know is a infamous religious order that's been accused of much misconduct everywhere in the world. And this is just one. How do you identify who is the owner, who does what? Is it relevant to the public? Why are we talking about this? We have a method for that. Of course, after 10 years, we kind of have our methodology. Otherwise, what are we doing here? And we have developed technology that helped us sort through this so much information. Datashare that you see here is a software that's been developed by our tech team. You can also download it. It's free. It works basically like a Google browser, just to make it simple. Once we are able to ingest the leak into our system, this platform that we have developed helps journalists from around the world search through the information. And so thanks to this, we were able to do the initial part of the reporting, because as you know, when you have a leak, it's just part of the story. It's not it. You also have to go into the field. You also have to talk to people to verify the information, and Delphine will talk to you more about that. So the first things that, if you know a little bit about the industry, the first things that you will search when you get so much information will be things like suspicious activity reports, for example, which are these reports that offshore service providers have to file to local authorities whenever they suspect that a client is using an offshore company to commit a crime, or whenever they know that there's been an investigation on that client. They will have to tell the authorities, these guys, in my system somehow. So we look for those terms. We look for communication with financial intelligence units, FIUs. We look for names like BO, beneficial owner, and other kind of jargon that we've become familiar with. Even it's very nerdy. And this is just part of our work, because as I said before, most of our ICIJ's work is also about collaboration. So reporters like us, we do the reporting, we do the story, but not alone, because we work also with partners in other countries. So we need to share information with them as basically a global big newsroom. And we do that thanks to another platform that ICIJ has developed. We call it the iHub, and it's a little bit like a private internal Facebook, where everyone who has found something can post about that finding. We post about, questions, interviews with sources, and at the end we coordinate comment requests, because obviously we have to go to the subjects of our stories to ask for about our findings and to ask for comment, and we coordinate that from the beginning to the end. And as we did this in Pandora Papers, we found many different things. Of course, we found a lot of criminals. We found the wife of a very famous Russian mobster. We found an Italian who was suspected of terrorism in the 70s and who had been able to hide his money while he was still being investigated for terrorism. He was later acquitted, but he was still a suspect at the time. Delphine Reuter, I don't know if you are familiar with this name. He did not have his name as Delphine Reuter, but he is with new Japanese name. So you have to obviously know the names of the criminals to find them, or suspected, in this case suspected. And we found also that the industry has evolved. So while before, when we were looking into Panama Papers, there were so small islands that have become, the center of this offshore industry, things have changed, because after pressure from politicians and activists and journalists on this offshore industry, small countries like Bahamas, for example, they had to reform. But at the same time, more powerful nations like the US were able to thrive and become actually the largest tax havens in the world. We also saw through this analysis that real estate and artworks are still some of the commodities that are most used to, to invest through offshore and shell companies. And then we also examined how, I'll talk to you about just one of them, one case that kind of exemplifies a little bit how we were able to find the hidden assets, but also to work with our colleagues, because this was very much a case where we used the leak, but also a lot of public sources and interviews to get to the bottom of this story. So the story is about a former Czech Prime Minister, Andrej Babis, who is a billionaire, very wealthy businessman, of course, who promised, like many European ministers, that tax havens were bad and the corruption had to be eliminated in their countries, and he would do anything to do that. Well, our leak, the documents that you find in Pandora Papers showed something a little bit different. They showed that a few years before he became a politician, he had used 3 shell companies to buy property in France. It was basically, he used BVI, Washington, and Monaco, so companies registered in 3 different jurisdictions, to then buy property, a very nice villa in the south of France. And this came from the Pandora Papers, and this is a scheme, like a chart that our partners and Investigace in the Czech partners did, because obviously we collaborated with the journalists from Czech Republic who were essential for the story. So our financial records told us, the secret financial records gave us kind of like the idea of what he had done. So we had to go and look outside of the data to verify the information first and to see whether it was relevant. Well, what we found, we collaborated with French reporters. I was in Washington, so I was able to help from there. And obviously, as I said, Czech reporters, but also German reporters and others from other countries who were interested in the bigger picture on how a prime minister at the time was able to hide this from his voters. So we used, from France, we used property records and land registry records to identify the property that was described in the leaked records, and to see he was still the owner, and how he had used these shell companies to secretly own the land. Then our Czech reporters obviously asked for information on what he had declared, the asset declaration forms that any politician usually has to file. And there was no mention of either of the companies or the property on those forms, which is not what the law tells politicians to do in Czech Republic and many other countries. And then we found those companies magically appearing many years later on on the financial statements, which are also public filings of one of his conglomerates. So basically, all of a sudden, this property had changed hands from his offshore companies to his conglomerate, and there was no public announcement about that. Everything had been done secretly. So naturally, we confronted him, Mr. Babis. We asked him many questions. We sent him many questions. I phoned him many times. Our colleagues from The Guardian phoned him. Nothing. He ignored us for almost a month. So one of our brave reporters, colleagues from Czech Republic, Hanna Kapova, one day, a few days before publication, approached him, right? Because he's a politician, he has to respond. Well, he was after an event, because it was election campaign, he basically ignored her. He had, I don't know, like 5 bodyguards around him. One of them elbowed our very brave colleague who stood there. It's very inspiring. It was very cool because, we had been reporting on this for many months and he had ignored us. And she was really like, I don't care. You have to tell me what the answer is. Well, he didn't say anything. What happened was that 1 week after we published, Mr. Babis lost the elections. So he didn't respond to us, but maybe voters, this has had some impact with voters who didn't appreciate him being so secret about his $15 million French property. And this is just one of the impacts that the Pandora Papers has had so far. Here I've listed the ones that we know about so far, but obviously, when we talk about impact, we are, in a way, we have to realize that we are privileged, and we live in in the Western nations, politicians in a way react. Some countries, politicians are very able to ignore the facts or even pressure journalists to be fired or ignored or threatened. So this is just a list of what's happened so far, but we hope that more investigations will follow. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so as Scilla was saying, I'm going to talk about, this okay? I'm going to talk about the data work and how we organized data for Pandora Papers. I am kind of a geek, so I'm going to try and keep it as as transparent and easy to understand as possible, because I tend to be I'm obsessed with spreadsheets, just so you know. I don't know if anybody is obsessed here with spreadsheets. Is anybody a data journalist? I know you are. Okay, good. Okay, a few of you. I feel less alone. But yeah, so this is what we do in the data team. We organize and structure information. In the case of the Pandora Papers, as Scilla was explaining before, we received files from 14 different offshore providers. It doesn't sound like much. I could tell you 14 or 26, it's just a number. But when you have to delve into these files, they become extremely complex and difficult to deal with, because every time you go from a provider to the other, it's a different way of organizing the information. So some of them use some terms, others in other jurisdictions use other terms. Their emails can be written in different ways. The documents they use are not the same. They don't tell the same type of information. In the case of the BVI, you have a lot of documents, but a lot of them are completely useless because they don't tell you anything about the beneficial owners. So it takes a lot of digging. But then once you understand how the providers organize the information, then it becomes much easier. So just to say that at the beginning of the investigation, there's always a learning period where we're like, are you finding anything? Maybe, I'm not sure. There's a lot of FOMO, I'm not sure I'm getting, everything I should get from this leak. There's also this pressure of we've published projects in the past where, we're very good at using leaks. So, we have 14 offshore providers. We have to make sure that we get the most of this one. So anyway, we had a lot of, we felt like we had a lot of responsibility at the beginning. And also, as Scilla was saying, this grew to be the biggest journalistic collaboration in history. So there were so many people going through these files. You have to help them as they come on board. And they come on board at different times. But you can explain that a little later. So the files span, or whatever, I'm not a native speaker. The files were spanning 5 decades, which means that you have documents that are, sometimes very difficult to decipher because they're so old. But the very good thing about this leak was that for the first time, we had information about thousands of beneficial owners of companies, which is something that a lot of journalists struggle with. You're looking for who owns a very weirdly named company, because those names don't mean anything, right? It's the offshore world, so those are shelf companies that people just buy and they don't really care what they're called. And you often hit a wall because all you see is this company is registered with OMC in Panama. I already know I'm not going to find anything, Or this company is registered with Trident Trust in the BVI. I'm going to hit a wall here. The BVI doesn't. You can ask the BVI for documents. You're never going to get much from it. So when we started digging through that, we got excited very quickly about the BVI, because a lot of the registered agents whose data came to us were from the BVI, and they actually had this act a few years ago called BOSS. Why? I don't know. It just sounded cool. So it's the Beneficial Owner Secure Search System, BOSS. And thanks to that, they actually had to get better at their job, because some of these registered agents actually don't do much. I mean, it's a lot of administration and paperwork, but they don't really know who the final clients of these companies are. And as Scilla was explaining, you have this network of enablers, private bankers, lawyers. They're the ones dealing with the clients in Switzerland, London, and elsewhere. But the registered agent in the BVI doesn't know who is behind the company. So all of a sudden, they had this act that they had to be asking for information about who the BOs are. So they had to store this information, meaning that when we access those files, we saw that information. So, yeah, so anyway, and as Scilla was explaining, you know, a lot of the things that we start to learn is that they use specific language. So BOSS was something that came up. We were able to identify specific spreadsheets using those, you know, specific terms. And then you know that a lot of the information is going to be structured the same way. Anyway, so we started doing this search. And once in the data team, we were able to pinpoint specific files that were more promising than others, then we made a decision to focus on those and organize as much information as possible and structure it in a way where we were able to give those files to the partners and they would use those files to find leads. Because you're not going to find the leads for them. I mean, you can, but the chance of finding leads, although you found a lot, but it's just they know the context much better in a lot of cases. So they need to look at those names and they will tell you, oh, but that's the mother of the, you know, husband of this and this. And you're like, oh, really? That's super interesting. You have never heard of this name before. Or it's written a different way, or people are using different names and you don't have this context. So we thought at the beginning, while we get used to these huge massive files and the way they're organized, or in some cases disorganized, we're just going to focus a lot of the effort of the data team on structuring this BO information. So as we are a data team, we produce spreadsheets. I think, I mean, spreadsheets are one of the tools that is the easiest to quickly use to find names, but they can also be very confusing. So we try to make them as easily usable or as possible. So we're trying to identify beneficial owners' names, and then you had the country where they were born, the country where they lived, the country of their passport, the country of the, different types of country information, and then we would make lists of those countries, and then tell people, okay, now is a new release of data from Tried and Trust. As much we could structure is here. Remember that, you know, the data that you're looking at is only a snapshot of the information that is in the data that we have access to. And here are all the countries that we have found in the data. So people would just filter, they would just open the files they were interested in and find leads. So this was a way we were trying to help them as much as possible. And then another thing that I would like to mention, we did a lot of different stuff. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. To be honest, sometimes it just doesn't work. And Tried and Trust was the most frustrating out of all of the 14 for me. We had more than 1 million documents, no, 3 million documents. And a lot of them were PDFs, but massive PDFs, thousands of pages of PDFs. And those PDFs were actually PDFs of spreadsheets. And you look at those and then you see that it's a spreadsheet spread over, 20 different PDFs. And then you have a form of a company with the BO's name. And then you have a passport of another BO that's not even in that form. But everything was collated together in a very, I don't know what happened with that company, but their filing system was extremely strange. So we decided to, as we usually do, to look for specific forms in which we had promising information and try to focus our effort on those forms so that we could find a system that would extract this information, structure it, and then we would be able to say, okay, here is the BO, the shareholder, and the director of those companies, and this information comes from the form, and then give that to our partner. And I worked with 2 of our colleagues. They use machine learning. They use lots of different types of OCR. It was a nightmare, and in the end, we got, some of this data will be, I will talk about it later, but will be publicly accessible. I got this spreadsheet with mangled names, but everything was categorized. So then I went manually back to the form, and I retyped everything correctly. And we are actually fact-checking this work so that this data can be made public. But just so you know, like, because of time constraints, because of technical issues, we could do this for years, and we wouldn't be done with the data that is in there, just because of the limitations that we face. So anyway, this is also part of the experience of being an investigative journalist. So we did a big effort. I mean, Scilla already talked about that. We identified a lot of politicians and public officials. The way we did that is we obviously give a lot to our partners. We also ask them to work in a structured way whenever we can. So we said, as you go through the documents, as you look for information that's of interest to you, if you find anybody that's a public official, let us know. So they would give us the name, and then we would do the analysis of all the companies that they have in the data. So we had a spreadsheet that grew to be more than 1,600 rows, and I think we are at number 600 and something now. Of names that we have reviewed. Mm-hmm. And then for some of these names, you would have 1 company or 20 companies, and some of them would be companies or foundations or trusts. So you just have to go through all the documents and see what is the company used for, how much, can we say how many assets they have? I mean, what's the value of the assets, what type of assets, what it was used for, what kind of countries are connected to that. So it's a massive effort, and you have to balance that with the fact that we have to complete it at some point. So we know that, you know, we have to restrict the amount of analysis and information we gather, because it has to be fact-checked a certain number of time to make sure that it's correct. But also we have to remain flexible, because reporters might come back and say, look, now I'm interested in knowing, what is the asset value that we have? Can we actually come up with a number? Then you have to go back and integrate that into the analysis as well and see, you know, if it's possible. So we like to use colors. So this is the result of our fact-checking. It starts white, and then as we go, every line that we think is one company. So every line is a different company tied to a different person. So you can have the same person and the same company, but it's different relationships. So anyway, so the red is not good. It's just a color code that we use. And then we created a visualization called the Power Players. We have an amazing product team as well. They try to be super flexible as well, but it's sometimes a bit difficult because there's so much to do at the end of the project. We have the comment letters being sent. We have the reporters who want to tie up loose ends. We have to finish the fact-checking of the data, and the product team has to prepare the whole publication, plus finish the visualization of all the data that we have. So it's a lot of pressure towards the end of the project. But the Power Players is just something that we like to have for offshore projects. So we display the data in different, I mean, it looks a little different, but it's basically the same idea. You have a profile of a person, and then we show the constellation of companies that we have found in the data for that person. So here is the case of the King of Jordan. And we are still working on the Offshore Leaks database, which is, you can see the URL on top if you're interested in having a look. If you have any questions about that, you can also write to me at data@icij.org. I'm the person looking at that inbox, for better or worse. So you can always ask me all the questions that you have, and we will try to integrate as much data as possible, but it's taking a lot more work than we thought. And it looks like this. So this is one of the companies tied to the king. So we try to integrate those as well in the visualization so that people can actually use this software. This is Linkurious, and you can click on the different nodes, which are the circles, or the edges, which are the lines. Trying to be as ungeeky as possible. This is the team that we had for Pandora Papers. This is not the team that we have all the time for the data and research team. It is fun. It is fun. So we have a tech team, so I'm not going to introduce everybody, but the important thing to keep in mind is that Scilla was saying we are a small team, and we are, we do remain a small team at ICIJ, and as we work on investigations, there's so much data fact-checking and other things that come into play that we need more people to come on board. So we had people in different countries who were working full-time alongside us, which is also part of the model. So, it has its pros and its cons, and you can also talk about the difficulties of working with a model like this. But it allows us during a specific project to work with amazing fact checkers and researchers for specific projects during, for specific number of months or whatever. We also have a fact-checking tool that is amazing. It's making our lives much easier. I can actually fact-check data beside a pool now, which is super cool. I've already done it once, but I hope I can do that again. Anyway, so it's called Prophecies, and it's also open source, like Datashare, iHub. It's something that is being developed by our tech team and our designers. And the way it works is that, I won't talk too much about it, and if you want to know more, you can go on GitHub and check it out. But basically, you would have data that you would be able to classify, so it would recognize something that you want to attach to each row of data, and then the people reviewing the data just say correct, incorrect, or something else. And we try to have this system talking more and more about this tool, because we think that it's going to be super useful for a lot of not only journalists, but anybody using data that needs to fact check it. Because otherwise you spend lots of time in spreadsheets. So how much time do I have? I think I have like 5 minutes. Yeah? So I'm going to speak about something that I found super fun during this investigation. I got to work with different reporters on a story about this guy who had a few trusts in the data. So it started very small. He had 2 Jersey trusts with not much information. They held BVI companies. You had some information about the assets, but you're not even sure that you can really rely on it. You have somebody who fills in a form and they say, this is the value of the assets that the company has, and you're like, okay, I'm going to rely on this. That's all I have, and then I have to dig further and see if there's a story behind it. And the person who had set up these trusts was an indicted art collector in the US. And he had, for a very long time, he's dead now, but we couldn't contact him for comment, obviously. But for a while, he had been traveling throughout Thailand and Cambodia, and he had bought a lot. He had amassed a huge collection of Thai and Cambodian art, including Khmer. And he published books that were very, very well reviewed. He was appreciated in Thailand, Cambodia, and different countries. He was recognized for somebody very well celebrated, and until he was indicted, and then he became too hot to handle for a lot of people. But anyway, what was of interest was for the reporters was they had this question. They had a lot of questions, but I only had to choose one for this example. Can we actually know how many of these Khmer antiquities that this guy has bought over the years, how many are held by museums around the world? Can we know this? Because we need this number for the story. It's important for us because Khmer art has been looted for decades, and the Cambodian authorities are actually asking for the art to be repatriated. So it's part of this bigger question of repatriation of art and antiquities. So we started this game of treasure hunt, which was both super frustrating and super interesting, as a lot of investigations are. And so there were reporters in different countries, people in Australia, in the UK, in the US, and Malia, our reporter in Spain. And they gathered information from websites, from catalogs, from libraries, and from those books that this guy published. So on the top left, you can see an example. So we have the book open. So we actually bought those books to look at all the pictures in there. And at the bottom, we had the name Skanda Trust. And Skanda Trust was the name of the trust in the data. So we're like, okay, it's his trust. We know that this piece was his at some point. So we put that piece in a spreadsheet. And then we tried to locate all the pieces that we had found in these books and see where they were and if museums held them. So we ended up having a massive spreadsheet that was way too complicated, I have to say, for the reporters who asked me for help a lot, because it was just a lot of data, a lot of information. But as you do comparison of things across countries and across the years, I just felt like I had to know how much it weighed and how tall it was and what kind of material it was, because a lot of these cultures are very much the same. So, but in the end, we classified everything, and then every time the reporter came to us and say, can we say how many were sold to the museum after 1970. We would have a column for that. So we just classified the whole findings. And that's it. That was... Yes, and as an impact of that story, actually some of the museums contacted the Cambodian authorities and repatriated the pieces. So that's cool. So off to you. Yes.
How many questions do we have? Okay, then I have 15 minutes. Hi everyone, I'm Jelena. I work as a training manager, coordinator for Eastern European Partnership, researcher as well. So I'm actually quite glad that I came third in this talk, because one of the most common prejudices towards ICIJ is that people think that we are the organization who just handles the documents to other media. And I'm so glad that Scilla and Delphine has explained in such details that you see that our work is so much more than that. We actually spend investigating and dealing with the data and technology behind it quite a lot. Actually, we do that all the time. And the moment we get the leaks, the moment that we get the documents, what we do is we set up teams that work around it, that we check data, that we check potential leads, that we create something that we call country lists. Delphine mentioned them. Those are the ones that we find the leads around certain country, we put them together, then we try to contact partners to join them for the project. What we do is that we have our own platforms, again mentioned here, that we use for the project, both for sharing ideas, sharing, communicating, and also our own database. So we onboard them, I train them how to use it, I train them how to search documents and things like that as well, among other things. One important thing is that everybody share findings, whenever they find things, they share it with us. And we share, of course, with our partners as well. Really important here is to mention is that, and I know both have mentioned, but why we have all these partners is, of course, from one side, the size of these projects are huge, but also is that we want to work with partners who are familiar with the local circumstances, who can contribute to the level that it would take years or even more for us to know about. Next to it is that, of course, we work a lot on stories. Sometimes it's several months for some of the projects. For Pandora, it was over a year. And I have to mention something else here, very important, is that this happened during COVID, like second year of COVID, another big project that we have done, even the bigger one. Yes, everybody was next to their screens, so they could check, and they have been in a way privileged to work on this, and be able to work on this set of amazing investigations that we have set and help shared among the globe, right? But it is hard work from them, and they had to be on the field, and they have to research. And then you see next steps are like preparing the stories, fact-checking everything. We reach for the comments, and then it's the publication. This is just like the brief outline that we would like you to share to see. It's, I believe, nothing much different than any other investigative news, report that any of you have done or will do. How we did it and kept everyone safe is that we had people around us that, and we are part of them as well, that help partners, that help ourselves as well. We had technology behind it, and we use data. All of these things are, I would say, like almost equally relevant for putting everything to the right place, because the puzzle that Scilla talked about is probably one of the biggest we will ever see in our lives. We are still probably going to get some others, yes, but at this stage it's quite big, right? So we needed help from all of the sides. One of questions that we are always asked is, how do I get to be an ICIJ partner? Partner means a media organization. We do have freelancers as well, but mostly media organizations who actually are part of these projects with us. And what do we do afterwards? So whoever we found that are friendly, professional, they have very important is to have a set of investigative skills, can approach us, and then we, talk with them. We see what they know, see how they work, and we actually assess: do we want a partner from certain country or not? Usually, we are approached personally by the partners who are coming from the countries that we have never worked before, but also sometimes we have more than one partner in certain countries, because some leaks are so big that we actually need more partners in some countries. But also we work with a different type of media, radio journalists or online print television as well. Why do you see this? I don't know. Do you see this on the screen behind me? Working on this kind of a project, I'm going to go back and forward. I don't know, will this work? Working on this, no? Okay. Working on this kind of a project is like making a dinner party where you ask everyone to bring their own dish. So somebody comes and brings their experience, expertise, skills, all of that together. So it's a mix of things. And this is how we like to do it, and this is like how we do it. For us, why this is important, and I mentioned the radical sharing. There is no information that any of the partner keeps to them. We share everything. So whatever any of the partner finds, we tend to share it with others, because you never know what kind of information actually helps someone else. Having said that, Scilla mentioned it, that we try to reduce egos, even though this is big in the media world. We know, we are aware of it, but we try to reduce that because that helps having the best project and having the best investigations there are. You have to communicate and you have to share everything. Talking about communication, the number of the meetings we had for the last year and a half is probably uncountable. We have regional coordinators. Scilla is covering Western Europe and Asia. We have coordinator for Africa. We have coordinator for Latin America and North America and Eastern Europe. So we have, each other has talked with our partners, then we talk together globally, then we talk on so many levels, topic-wise, stories-wise, issues-wise, safety, security-wise. But all of this is helping getting the project there and also keeping everybody safe, because then we are able to assess if there is a situation where we need to act. Just one small thing. I think I had over 300 trainings with partners all over the globe for less than a year on Pandora Papers to explain the complexity of the data, just like probably not to the level of Delphine explained to you, or to help them find things in the documents and help them use our platforms as well. Technologies that we mentioned several times, I just want to mention here, you see the link. Datashare is the platform that we use where you can actually download. We use it as our own database. If you download, you won't have that data. But what you will have is opportunity to upload your own data and to play around it, to see how useful it is. You can actually make, by downloading this tool, you can actually make your own database on your computers that will be able to help you out in your research, daily work, and everything. It doesn't have to be that you're an investigative reporter. I think this helps to everyone, because you actually, through years, will have the piles of the documents. You can scan them, put them in here, and you will be able to check them out whenever you want. It's a marvelous tool, I have to say. Okay. So risky situations, you can, I'm sure like whoever did this story anytime had them. So this is some that we mark the most important ones. And for us, the most important ones are around sending comment letters to those powerful players that we mentioned. So powerful players are usually presidents, prime ministers from different countries. We send them letters. This is the moment where the whole world knows that there are a group of journalists, and ICIJ has now this in its CV. So everybody knows when we send a comment letter what that means usually, that there is a huge project behind it. So by sending these comment letters, we actually putting all partners in danger. Sometimes we send comment letters for them. Sometimes we send, sometimes these comment letters mean that they have to flee their countries to live somewhere else. And during Pandora, we had so many press freedom issues. Only some you can see on the screen behind me, but we, even before publication or after the publication, journalists had to leave their countries. Journalists weren't named in the leak. Journalists, sometimes we couldn't even name the media organizations we work with, and in extreme situations, we didn't even say that we worked with anyone in the country. And then we just say that ICIJ reported on it. This is how dangerous it is. Through the years of working on these projects, we have seen this, that the press freedom situation deteriorated in all over the globe. So this is why the emphasis on this many situation has become important for all of us. One of the situations that has happened about the Babis, the Prime Minister from Czech Republic, that Scilla talked about, is that he personally is attacking the journalist and the editor of the investigative center in Czech Republic. I would just like to wrap up this talk with only one thing, is that next to all of the things that projects like this brings, like giving so many new investigations to partners, helping partners being safe, providing the voice to the partners that could not talk, and also trying to learn from each other, which is extremely relevant. With all of this that is actually going on in Ukraine now, the war that Russia started, I have to say that all of these journalists has been like personally attacked by this. And having this amazing tool that we have is an opportunity for all of the partners to work even harder on the really important topics, not only when it comes to investigations, but also in the time of crisis like now is happening. This has become the global resource that you also can use by opening our Offshore Leaks database that it's online, that Delphine talked about, that we all can contribute to what is actually happening and where the money flows and bad guys are hiding them. Thank you.
Thanks. We have one question. Okay, from Eduardo. Ciao. Okay, the question is, can I read it? Yes? Okay. So I worked for an Italian local media, and I did a story about an Italian Maltese businessman who is a client of Trident Trust. Will data from Pandora Papers be released in the Offshore Leaks database? Delphine.
Yeah, so you're a journalist, right? Yeah, you should write to me, and then we can see if... when is this really? When do you publish? Oh, you can't say? Before the Pandora Papers. Oh, you have published in the past. Okay. Yeah, so in the case of Trident Trust, we will release data very soon. The problem... Oh, sorry.
We have three questions, but you finish.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
Okay. Okay, I will be very brief. We will release the data, but come and talk to me and I can explain all the difficulties.
Okay, this is from Nicola. So, people like you, okay, are people like you in danger?
Yeah, you have already answered me.
Okay. Have you ever started? Which one should I? Do you have three? Number two? Okay. Have you ever started an investigation from an interest in a particular company or person and found something wrong about him, them, her? Without a leak. Yes. which is a great actually question, because ICIJ doesn't only do investigations based on leaks. We also do investigations based on public records. For example, a few years ago, we did an investigation called Implant Files, which was into the global medical device industry, and we used data from public records. We actually requested through FOIA and RTI laws more than 700 documents, and we built a project based on that. And we investigated multinationals based on, their public filings and obviously other reporting techniques. So yes, we do that, and we would like to do more of that. So invite people to send. Invite people to send if you have. Yeah, of course. If you have ideas for global investigations into anything that are also not leaked, please reach out to us. Okay, we have another question. Andrea Galliano, ciao. Did the ICIJ investigate the role of cryptocurrencies to avoid sanctions against Russia? No. Crypto is very interesting, but it's kind of a mess. It's very difficult to look into that. If you are interested in, and if you, for example, find leads in our public database, you are welcome to contact us, me, or whomever. We can only do so much, and we take some months to investigate. Our partners do their own, but obviously these are infinite stories. So for journalists who actually want to keep digging into this data, please talk to us, because with some restrictions and after some talking to you and getting to know you, we do collaborate with new partners after publications. So Paul Toys, hi. What did you learn from Panama and Paradise that informed Pandora? And what did you learn from Pandora that you wish you'd known while doing the others?
I worked a little bit on Panama, but not as much as other people. I think what I would have liked to know at the time of Panama Papers was just be more familiar with some of the tricks that the people use to build those schemes, because sometimes there's just so many documents tied to one company, you don't know how to prioritize your research. And then you spend a lot of time just going through every document because they all kind of look of important or have the same importance. But as you go through it, you kind of understand which are the documents you have to look for. The beneficial owner declaration, the register of members, and then you learn to look for specific patterns in how those companies are being used, what kind of loans they have when they are closed down, and you look for why they used certain jurisdictions versus others. I mean, I'm talking from a data perspective, but I wish I had known that during Panama, because I spent so much time just reading a lot of documents that I didn't really need to find the story in the end. Yes. Yeah, it's those patterns that after a while you can pick and kind of as like a methodology that you learn from.
Okay. Another question from Federico Acosta. Hi. How do you address information security issues while you're working on a project?
Well, depends what kind of information security. Like encryption, you want to add something? But we hear you. You can speak up. Yeah. No worries.
No, you talk about the importance of sharing information. You have a platform, your own platform to do that, and that's a big advantage. But on the other hand, if one person is hacked, one journalist is hacked, a lot of information can be leaked from your own project. So I was wondering about how you deal with this.
That's excellent. That's quite a good question. So if you haven't heard, because we had like 600 journalists, if one journalist is hacked, Federico is saying that means that the whole project can be jeopardized and everything can be hacked. All of our tools have double encryption. And not only that, like we have like several layers of security steps before that, and we are secure. This is why I said like the tech side is immensely important. We are secured for the tech side, but we also very much invest in like how do you keep yourself safe while working on this project? Meaning like the mistakes are usually done by people, so we train them, explain them how to use them, under what circumstances. And like I mentioned in the beginning, we said plan everything. So we also have like the idea the moment they think that something happened, they let us know. And then we take all the steps that it's needed in order to keep this safe. So far, this has not happened. I'm gonna do this so that it stays that way.
I think it's 7:30. We were told to stop as immediately as 7:30. So if you have more questions, I don't know if you see our emails. No, you don't see our emails on the screen, but please reach out. On our website, you can find our emails anyway. Thank you very much.